Elara's life was a testament to the beauty of the mundane. She lived in a small, two-story apartment above her workshop in the city of Haven. Her days were a quiet, predictable rhythm of steel on steel, the smell of ozone and burnt wiring, and the soft, repetitive clinking of tools. She repaired things, not grand things, like the colossal automated sentinels that patrolled the city's perimeter. Small, forgotten things. Rusted toaster ovens, broken data slates, children's clockwork toys. She was a woman of calloused hands and tired eyes, her face etched with lines that spoke more of silent thought than of age. To the people of Haven, she was a fixture, a quiet ghost in a city that celebrated loud triumphs. The city of Haven was, in itself, a monument to a past victory. 10 years had passed since the Great War, a conflict that had nearly shattered the human commonwealth. General Alistair Bonzaman, whose face was on every public mural, and whose voice was a staple of every celebratory broadcast, was the architect of that victory. He was a man of cold, strategic brilliance and a disdain for anything that wasn't a perfectly tuned war machine. He believed the world was divided into two kinds of people, soldiers and civilians. Soldiers fought the wars, and civilians just existed. This distinction was never more apparent than on Victory Day. The city was a sea of crimson and gold, the colors of the Commonwealth Army. The parade was the highlight, a spectacle of synchronized soldiers, polished armor, and, at its center, the colossal the Thunderwalker was a relic of the war. A 30-foot mechanized behemoth that had been the spearhead of the final assault. Its feet thudded on the pavement, a rhythmic, powerful reminder of the force that had saved them all. General Vance stood on a viewing platform, a crisp, imposing figure in a starched uniform, his chest a forest of medals. He watched the Thunderwalker with a possessive pride, his face a mask of steely satisfaction. The parade was a meticulously planned tribute to his genius. There was no room for error, no room for humanity, and then, it happened. The Thunderwalker, a few hundred yards from the viewing platform, stumbled. It let out a horrific, grinding shriek, a sound of stressed metal and failing systems. Its right leg, a masterpiece of hydraulics and kinetic motors, seized. The walker teetered, a monstrous, metal leviathan, threatening to topple over onto the crowded street below. A gasp, followed by a wave of panicked screams, rippled through the crowd. The perfectly ordered soldiers broke rank, their discipline shattering in the face of this unexpected chaos. General Vance's face, which had been a mask of pride, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His perfect parade was ruined. Engineers in crisp uniforms swarmed the crippled machine, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. They were a legion of well-meaning amateurs, trained for maintenance, not for crisis. The walker's diagnostics panel was a confusing constellation of red lights. They had no idea what was wrong. Useless, Vance bellowed, his voice amplified by a hidden speaker. All of you, useless. We have a city of 10 million people, and a simple maintenance issue stops our greatest symbol. He slammed his fist on the railing, his eyes scanning the streets below for a solution. His gaze fell upon a small, nondescript workshop nestled between two towering apartment buildings. A woman in a grease-stained smock was peering out her window. A subordinate, a young, nervous major, followed his gaze. Sir, that's just a local repair shop. They handle civilian junk. They handle what now? Vance growled, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. If my elite engineers can't fix this, maybe some civilian who knows the guts of a machine can. Get me that woman. Now. Within minutes, 2 soldiers in immaculate white uniforms stood in Ilara's workshop. They found her at her workbench. A delicate laser cutter in her hand, meticulously repairing a damaged child's automaton. Ma'am, you're needed, one of them said, his voice clipped and formal. The general requires your assistance. Ilara looked up, her expression unreadable. She looked at the gleaming soldiers, the pristine white uniforms. She looked out the window at the crippled Thunderwalker, its silhouette, a hulking monument to failure. She sighed. I only work on small-scale electronics, she said, her voice a low, raspy murmur. That thing is a little outside my purview. The general doesn't have time for this, ma'am, the second soldier said, his tone turning to an impatient sneer. You're a mechanic, right? We have a major piece of hardware down. You will assist. This is an order. Ilara looked from the soldiers to the Thunderwalker, a flicker of something long buried, stirring in her eyes. It wasn't a look of fear, or even of annoyance. It was a look of profound, weary resignation. Fine, she said, setting down her tools. Let's go. She was led through the no-chaotic streets. Her simple smock, a stark contrast to the pomp and circumstance of the Victory Day parade. She arrived at the Thunderwalker's massive feet, where a dozen engineers were still arguing amongst themselves, their diagnostic tools beeping uselessly. The general was there, a thundercloud of a man, his face dark with fury. He saw her and sneered. This is who they brought me. A woman who looks like she just came from mending a broken tea kettle. Look at her. Probably a washed-up soldier who couldn't cut it and got a cushy civilian job. Ilara didn't flinch. She simply walked past him, her eyes fixed on the walker's damaged leg. She walked with a strange, fluid grace, a stillness that seemed out of place in the chaos. The main drive motor is a Classa industrial hydraulic, an engineer said, desperate to sound useful. It's completely seized. We can't get a reading on the diagnostics. Ilara ignored him. She placed her hand on the walker's metallic foot. She didn't look at the diagnostic panel. She felt the vibrations, the subtle tremor of a machine in pain. She closed her eyes for a moment, her face a mask of intense concentration. Cat. The hydraulic pressure is in the red, she murmured, her voice almost inaudible, but the kinetic capacitors are green. That's a contradiction. The engineers looked at her as if she were speaking an alien language. The sensor is wrong, Ilara said, her eyes opening. It's been spliced. The system thinks the hydraulic is fine, but the feedback loop is failing. The entire leg is a walking time bomb. It's not just a mechanical failure. It's sabotage. A collective gasp went through the engineers. The general's eyes, which had been full of contempt, narrowed. Sabotage. That was a word he understood. That was a word that demanded his full attention. Prove it, he commanded, his voice a low growl. Ilara didn't respond. She walked to the walker's command console, a panel of blinking lights and humming readouts. She moved with a purpose that was both shocking and mesmerizing. She ignored the user interface, the complex series of menus and subroutines that were the only way to access the machine's core. Instead, she knelt and placed her hand on a small, discrete panel on the walker's leg, a maintenance access port that was only used for a complete system reboot. She pressed her thumb against a small, unmarked indentation on the panel. The panel didn't open. A small, red light blinked. "It's a biometric lock," an engineer said, his voice laced with nervous laughter. "It's a security feature to prevent unauthorized access. The only one who can open that is the original engineering team, and their fingerprints are on file in the main data core. You'll never open it." Ilara didn't respond. She simply stared at the red light, her brow furrowed in thought. It was then that a flash of frustration crossed her face, a brief but powerful crack in her calm exterior. With a quiet curse, she rolled up the sleeve of her grease-stained smock. The soldiers, the engineers, the general, they all watched as she exposed her forearm. Coat. It was a normal arm, unblemished and slender, until they saw a small, discreet tattoo on the inside of her wrist. It was a single, stylized emblem. A coiled serpent wrapped around a broken cog, its eyes a pair of intersecting lines. It was not a tattoo in the traditional sense. It was a scar, a brand, a permanent mark seared into her flesh. Candace. And as she held her wrist to the biometric lock, the emblem began to glow. The red light on the panel turned to a brilliant emerald green. The maintenance port hissed open, revealing a tangle of wires and a small, almost invisible data port. The general, watching the impossible unfold before him, went utterly, completely still. His face, which had been a mask of fury, was now a mask of profound, devastating shock. He had seen that emblem before. He had seen it on classified documents, in the darkest, most secret corners of the Commonwealth's military intelligence. The emblem was that of the Ghosts, a legendary, top-secret, special forces unit. Its existence, a state secret. Its members' identities erased. Their memories supposedly wiped. Their very existence a ghost story whispered in the halls of power. They were the men and women who had won the war, not with brute force, but with precision. They were saboteurs, assassins, and engineers of impossible systems. They were the ones who could break any code, disable any machine, and win a war from the shadows. The general knew of them because his own career, his greatest victory, was a direct result of a mission the Ghosts had undertaken. He had built his fame on their sacrifice. And now, one of them stood before him, not as a soldier, but as a simple woman in a grease-stained smock. Ilara ignored the stunned silence. She reached into the panel, her fingers a blur of motion. She detached a small, microscopic chip that was spliced into the main power conduit. The chip was of an alien design, a small piece of a foreign technology that had been a signature of their last enemy. She had been right. It was sabotage. She then respliced the wires, her movements fluid and confident. She was no longer a mechanic. She was an artist, a master of a forgotten trade. She closed the panel, the biometric lock clicking back into place with a soft, final thud. The Thunderwalker's diagnostics panel, which had been a carnival of red, now turned to a peaceful, steady green. A low, powerful hum emanated from the machine as its systems came back online. She stood up, her face a serene mask. her expression betraying nothing of the storm that was now raging in the general's mind. "It's a kinetic motor issue," she said, her voice quiet. The capacitors were being deliberately overcharged by a foreign chip. The stress on the hydraulic system was a secondary effect. It would have seized the main actuator in a few more seconds, causing the entire chassis to collapse. "I've removed the chip and rebalanced the power flow. The Thunderwalker is operational." She then looked directly at General Vance. Her eyes, which had been tired and calm, now held a deep, profound knowledge. They were the eyes of a person who had seen the worst of humanity, who had faced 100 deaths and 1,000 betrayals. She was a ghost. She was a memory. She was a living monument to a war he thought he had won alone. The general, a man of power and authority, was now a small, pathetic figure. He stammered, his mind reeling. "But, you, the ghosts. They were all disbanded," Alara said, her voice a low, cold whisper. "Their names were erased. Their memories were purged. They were all given a clean slate. A quiet life. A life where they could be simple civilians. We did our job. We won the war. And we were given our peace." She turned and walked away. Not a soldier, not a mechanic, but a woman who had just saved the day. The soldiers and engineers, still in a state of shock, watched her go. The general, who had been a symbol of strength and power, now stood in silent, horrified defeat. He had called her a washed-up soldier, but he now knew the truth. She hadn't washed up. She had simply buried herself. Ilara returned to her workshop, the soft clang of her tools a familiar and welcome sound. Her quiet life was no longer a quiet life. The general knew. He would not speak. His reputation, his career, his very identity was built on the foundation of a lie. But she knew that her quiet existence was now a fragile thing. A single, exposed emblem had shattered the peace she had fought so hard to earn. But as she picked up her laser cutter, she found a new strength. She had been a soldier once, and a part of her, the part that lived in the darkness, the part that was a ghost, was ready to fight again.